This is System Crash. I'm Paris Marks.
And I am Brian Merchant. This week on the show, Elon Musk is out at Doge, kind of. He leaves with a black eye, both literally and figuratively. So we dive into what Musk's exit means for the Department of Government Efficiency, the role of the Tesla Takedown protests in tanking his reputation, and where all of this stands to go from here.
Plus, Elon Musk's failed quest to kill OpenAI Stargate, Palantir's mass data collection on Americans, and so much more. This system has just begun to crash, so support the show by heading over to patreon.com/systemcrashpod, where you can sign up to get monthly bonus episodes. Also, rate the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Now, Brian, I have an important question to ask you. Do you ever look at your child and tell them to punch you in the face?
That's how I start every day. Every day, I gaze lovingly at my children, and I say, will you punch me in the face? And they do.
Perfect. I don't see a black eye, though. They must be better at it, or you must be better at absorbing the punches at this point than Elon Musk, of course.
Than frail Elon Musk on like 4 seconds of sleep a night between ketamine doses or whatever it is he's doing.
Yeah, it's not just ketamine. Apparently he's on ecstasy and Adderall and all this other stuff, according to the New York Times.
Oh, yeah. He's got a regimen. It could be the psilocybin, could be the mushrooms, could be, God knows what. Or it could just be like ecstasy, 19 Diet Cokes.
Yeah.
The most pathetic. This is what he says. This is his explanation for the black eye, right?
Yeah, exactly. He was. I don't know if he was even asked or if he just figured someone was going to ask, so he, figured he would tell a story. He was like, I was playing with little X and I told him to punch me in the face, and he punched me in the face. This is how we play, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like on the one hand, honestly, maybe this is plausible. Like, kids have done, more damage to their dumb fathers than this. But it also doesn't this I feel like it's like an ominous foreshadowing for his arch villain story. Yeah, my billionaire dad was messing around with me, so I decided to just punch him right in the face where everyone could see it and set about a chain of events that would remove him from power once and for all. Just like a finger twiddling in the dark. So I don't know, maybe he's already got things in motion. This is the future of the nation belongs to XAE 12 whatever.
That's your think casting, but in my mind I'm just seeing Elon Musk in a drug-addled haze and falling over and smacking his face on some piece of furniture.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about what really honestly happened here. He just you stood up and walked into a doorknob or something, or just it's he just there's
pretty high doorknobs at his house.
Yeah, that's true. What else? I mean, what is he, or somebody punched him in the face?
That's possible. Stephen Miller for taking his wife or something.
Stephen
This
Miller.
is the other story that is circulating at the moment.
That's a good weird, but I haven't had nearly enough time to go through all the gossip stories. But what is the Stephen Miller thing? I know that they're feuding on Twitter, and that there's something with his wife, his Miller's wife left the White House at the same time as Musk, right?
Yeah, Miller's wife was working at Doge and was kind of the point man there, and there were stories that he was getting along well with the Millers, and they were spending time together outside of government duties and things like that. And then before Elon Musk announced he was leaving Doge, she announced that she was also leaving Doge and joining one of Elon Musk's companies or something like that, I believe. Also a story that I haven't been following all of the ups and downs on because everyone is saying everything.
More important things to
totally
do with our time, but still,
got to know the gossip, right?
I mean, how it's just another just layer to all of this, because Wall Street Journal's big story about Elon's harem of people that he's paying off to raise his children in the shadows, and
not just raise them.
Bear them and raise them. Yeah, and it's it's his whole game. Most of those women he didn't have relationships with directly, or a lot of them he didn't. He just finds them and then pays them to have his children. And I think they didn't even have physical relationships a lot of the time. He's just spreading his repulsive seed as far as possible.
He's
And
just trying to level up humanity. That's all.
level up humanity, get a fleet of Muskians ready to, die in the first voyage to Mars as, the starship bursts a hole in the hull 12 minutes after takeoff or whatever.
I don't know if he's putting his own offspring on that first flight. He'll probably take some of those migrants from the borders and
I
put
don't
them
know,
on the
man.
flights.
He seems like it really depends which one. Like he seems to have affection for X, maybe because he's willing to punch him in the face. The rest of them, he seems pretty willing to pretend like they don't exist. So maybe that is his ultimate goal here, just to get them onto a spaceship, land on Mars, and then just his DNA lives on as the planet burns back home.
Grim. And I'm going to pivot us at this point.
Wow, we started off with quite a tangent here. We're just so excited. We're just so excited to talk about Elon. We haven't talked about Elon for a few weeks.
This is true. Yeah. We need a bit more Elon time, and this is our episode for it because, getting back to Elon Musk apparently getting punched in the face by his kid, we know that because he was at the White House because he announced that he was leaving Doge, because his 130 days as a special government employee are up. And so, technically he needs to do that. But there are questions as to whether he is really done with Doge and whether it's really behind him. So I'm wondering, Brian, what do you think? Do you think that Elon Musk is telling the truth here? His days in the government are over now. He is just going back to Tesla and SpaceX to try to fix all the problems in those businesses. Or, is this kind of a bit of marketing to try to show the investors that things are okay, but really his hands are still going to be in the Doge pie here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little from column A, B, and C. Like, I think it's a little bit of all of the above, right? Like, I think there's been a lot of good reporting on sort of what's happened in the last month or two in the White House and in his companies. And obviously we're all aware that there's an outrage among sort of Tesla investors. Even like a lot of Tesla bulls are like, what are you doing? Like, get back, because obviously the stock price was tanking. There's like a real desperation to show that he is in charge, because there's, as we've talked about so many times on this show, like Tesla needs him at the helm to sort of justify its outsized stock price. So I think there's some he realizes on some level the damage that he's been doing, and he's got to get out of there and sort of make a show of getting back. But I also think the relationship between him and Trump is still fine. I think that it seems like it hasn't curdled to the extent that maybe some people are assuming it has. That one's a little bit harder to read. At least I'll put it this way: he pissed off a lot of people. It's really clear that he pissed off a lot of people. He got in shouting matches with Scott Bessent at one point. There was reports of all of this sort of people who were just are really fed up with Musk, who think a lot. There's that funny Politico report a while back with all the people who are just like, man, he's a loser. Like, he's always trying to make jokes and no one's laughing at them. And it's just like,
well, there was this interesting report in the Wall Street Journal as well recently, talking about the relationship between Trump and Musk and suggesting that it's not as good as it used to be, but is also not as bad as some people believe. There's this kind of, example moment that they talk about where, Trump was recently asking about how Elon Musk promised he was going to, slash all this government spending, and basically asking officials if it was all bullshit from the beginning. That's what Trump
said. Yeah, Trump was
Trump said. But what I really enjoyed from this story is it says that Trump described Musk to his aides as 50% genius and 50% boy, which I thought was a pretty accurate description,
I still think that's giving him too much credit, but
sure, yeah.
I think the important thing to take away from all of this is that Trump, once again, has really sort of won. Elon Musk did the job. He did everything that the Trump administration and Trump's allies wanted him to do and more up to a certain point when now he's become, less politically useful and he's become a liability in a lot of ways. So I think they're much more willing to, at least sort of the organization is willing to start pushing him out. But I think as long as he's the richest guy in the world, or even in the upper echelons of that, he's going to be like number one to Trump. That's the simple calculus that matters. Here's a guy who's rich and powerful, and he'll do what I say. He'll never be too far from my good graces.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal story says that, they're still getting dinner together regularly, even though Trump sometimes finds some of the things Musk says kind of weird. But there is that commitment. I think one of the potential breaches there is that apparently, remember like a month or so ago, Elon Musk promised that he was going to give $100 million. This was after the Tesla demo in front of the White House when he was really down about how Tesla was doing. And so Trump, kind of did this little salesman show with him. And Musk promised $100 million to go into the president's super PAC to support Republicans in the primaries. And apparently that money has not arrived, and it's not clear that he's still going to give it. So this is like one of the questions that are up in the air. But I think I would say more generally, I am skeptical that he is fully done at Doge. Obviously Trump himself has said that Musk isn't going anywhere, and Musk has said that he's going to remain a friend and advisor. I think it's much more likely that sure, he is leaving this position where he has an official position in government, but all of his underlings are still throughout the government at the moment, people who have previously worked at his companies. And I'm sure that continues to give him influence, and he will still have, this relationship to the Trump administration, to these officials in the administration. I can't see Elon Musk wanting to give up the authority and influence that he has gained in the government, especially when it helps him to ensure that agencies of the government will not be regulating his companies, holding them accountable for the actions that they are taking. That seems too much in his favor for him to really leave this all behind.
Yeah. Well, and I think this new stage is in many ways more insidious than the last one. I think there's that story in Wired that was basically reporting how Doge is still going full speed. And I don't know, this is something that we're going to have to sort of see how it plays out. But on the one hand, when there's this figurehead who's become very hated, who's leading the charge, that makes for a very identifiable, a point of resistance for Tesla Takedown and what I mean, Tesla Takedown gained steam. And I think we haven't even mentioned yet how successful Tesla Takedown was in this equation in sort of just accelerating the bad vibes around Musk, connecting Musk to all of this misery he's causing in the White House and causing in federal government, especially, firing federal workers and, causing a lot of misery and pain, and that really drawing together that connection. And I think that really did help do, reputational damage to Musk that made him that forced him into this position when he has to leave. That said, all of his lieutenants, like you said, are still there. They're still on the ground, and he can still benefit immensely. Trump, for all the grousing about how lame he is and how much they hate him, he's still a fountain of cash. He still owns X, the most important propaganda platform to the right. He still has legions of followers, diminished though they may be from the peak, and he still has all these people. We're in government. He can still make deals and connect data. He can still push Starlink. He can still play a really outsized role in influencing what's happening there. So he gets a lot of the upside now without being in Wisconsin and putting a cheese hat on and everyone thinking he looks like an idiot, which, by the way, I think is one of the main inflection points. By losing that race, I think it just it drove home that, there's limits to how much people will tolerate of you, and you're starting to generate real backlash in the public. Is that, along with the the declining Tesla share price, I think, are the two big things for on the external side to push him out. Internally, we know that he's like ruffled all these feathers and people are sick of him.
I'll be honest though, I thought he was looking like an idiot well before he put the cheese hat on.
No,
But
that was
I
it.
agree with
I
you,
was on
right?
board with Elon until the
Yeah,
cheese hat. Yeah.
that's when he lost you. Yeah.
It's like, wait a
But
minute.
I think you're right though, right? Like I think much more of this is like PR because Tesla is really struggling right now. They're seeing these sales declines, they're seeing the profit declines. It's not clear that that is going to be turned around. They're looking at, rolling out this robo-taxi service in Austin. I think that is going to be a nightmare because Tesla's self-driving system does not actually work very well. It is not nearly as good as these other competitors that are already expanding into other places. But then the other piece that I feel like, we talk a lot about Tesla because of the Tesla takedown and, because of the fact that Tesla is a much more public facing company. It's also, a publicly traded company for that, so that plays into it too. But SpaceX is dealing with a lot of issues right now as well, because it's trying to make its Starship rocket work basically. And we've had these continual stories over the past number of months about these explosions that the rocket is going through. And when you talk to experts, I was talking to Tim Fernholz over on Tech Won't Save Us in the past few weeks. There are serious questions from experts within the industry as to whether the Starship rocket is ever actually going to work in the way that Elon Musk promised. And if it doesn't, like that is a serious hit to SpaceX. So like there are a number of fires that he has to put out right now in his businesses. So I think it works for him to be able to project to investors that, look, I'm not involved in all of these actions within the federal government and so linked to the Trump administration as I was before.
That's going to be good enough for some people, but I think like the stink is there for a lot, like especially like in Europe. I don't think Tesla's coming back. I think a lot of damage has been done. It'll be interesting to say. Like people are so eager to believe, and for such a long time, Musk was like this reliable, like Superman, Tony Stark, fantastical figure. And so maybe like there's a number of investors who are just happy to go like, well, he's done that, and I can just put my money back on the table and and let it ride. But I think a lot of people are more uneasy now. I think some damage has been done. And I think that, the damage has been done. There's been a lot of these pieces that have come out and looked to quantify, sort of, obviously it's horrific what the ramifications of sort of tearing up U.S. aid has been for, providing hunger relief. And there's been some calculations that, lots of people have probably died directly as a result of this.
And can I lay some of those out? Because,
yeah, please.
There's an article in the American Prospect that kind of went through some of this stuff. Obviously, we've seen the effects to weather prediction, air traffic control, disaster relief, all of these sorts of agencies that are being dismantled that are not working nearly as well as they were before. Questions about what inaccurate weather forecasts are going to mean for people. Warnings about tornadoes and other natural disasters and that sort of stuff. Obviously, because of the dismantling of USAID, you have warehouses full of food that are rotting. That food not getting out to people who really need it. People in Sudan who were reliant on some of that aid now being basically starving as a result of it. You're seeing millions of people who would have gotten like HIV medications and things like that now not receiving them because of these cancellations. There is an estimate that roughly about 1,500 babies have been born since January 21st every single day who are HIV positive because their mothers were not able to get, the medication that would have stopped that or reduced the risk of that being like passed on to their babies. And that's not to mention the tens or hundreds of thousands of people that are estimated to have died because of aid being cut off. Like these are really significant numbers.
It's just horrific.
And I really hope that the media is not going to allow Elon Musk to get away from the massive damage and harm that he has caused around the world.
Of course they are. Of course they are. They already are. I mean, this is, I think, maybe the most monstrous thing that because I think it's in his addled mind. I think he's of course he's unwilling to provenance any sort of blame or responsibility for any of that, because in his reality, in his alternate reality, like, that doesn't exist. That's not true. USAID is a terrorist organization. Like, he's tweeting out all the time. His sycophant followers are in his replies, like, backing him up. So that's where he's at. And that's where his, supporters are all too happy to sort of, just rally behind that narrative. And then it becomes the classic journalistic, both sidesing of that stories, and we're already sort of caught in the middle. It's like, well, was this a government efficiency project? Like, was this just sort of like a casualty of a supercharged effort to make the government more efficient? It's just what drives me so nuts. And it's not like, here's a complete asshole with total self-regard, into levels of megalomania that you and I can only dream of, just like charging into an arena with no efforts made to gather any actual information about what's happening on the ground or what his decisions might, might cause, and just wreaking havoc and then just washing his hands of it, it's just like really repugnant on a moral dimension. And I think it's like the perfect underlining of sort of, the gravity and the danger of like the Silicon Valley mindset integrating with the administration. And, that's what I also want to talk about next, is like, it has been integrated. Like, his job is done there. He has fully succeeded in getting this sort of, efficiency first, AI first strategizing and mentality on the ground, where Doge can continue this work, continue gutting, departments, continue mining data, continue firing federal workers. And like I said before, like, I think that this operation may be more dangerous and insidious now, just because it can sort of operate under the radar without headlines. On the other hand, maybe it can be opposed. Maybe people will be more empowered to sort of stand up and say, hey, Musk is gone. Like, what the fuck are you doing in my office? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, there's this interview that he gave with CBS Sunday Morning where he's talking about some of these things, right? And how Doge has basically become the lightning rod and the agency to blame for everything, even if, as he claims in the interview, that it's not involved with a specific decision. It becomes something that is that Doge is responsible for, basically. And I don't think he's entirely truthful in that. Obviously he's trying to say that Doge is not responsible for nearly as much as it was, when that is not entirely true, because it was, helping to actually dismantle this. But I think you're right in the sense that if Elon Musk is not there any longer, the question is, how does Doge get covered in the light of that? Do people pay as much attention to it because it's not directly associated with this man who has become such a lightning rod? Like, there's one, trajectory where it's like, okay, it's not linked to Musk, so it's easier to push back on. But then there's another one where it's like, it's not linked to Musk, so people aren't paying as much attention because, this guy is not so clearly embedded in this organization and directing what it is doing.
Yeah.
So I think that really remains to be seen.
It really does. And I think a lot of it is up to federal workers and their allies, us, to sort of take this opportunity in this juncture to sort of, make it known that they're not going to be pushed around. And I think there's a real opening to do that in, right? To say that, instead of just handing the keys over. I mean, again, it's hard to say because like the culture has changed in a lot of agencies, but they're still coming to new agencies. But I think it really depends a lot, and it's tough, and you don't want to lay any more burden at the feet of the workers. But unfortunately, there's not a ton of great responses to all this stuff. I would just refer to I did a long interview with Eric Blanc a little while ago, the labor historian and professor, who has been involved a lot with sort of with the federal worker sort of resistance to all this, and he has a great sort of outline for ways that federal workers can resist this, drawing from other successful struggles like the teachers' struggle in West Virginia of a few years ago, and a lot of stuff still applies. But yeah, I think there's a weakening, right? With Musk gone, it's like there's a victory there in pushing him out on behalf of the anti-Musk, anti-Trump contingents and protesters, and so like I think that if that momentum can be held, but like you said, yeah, it's all. I mean, the media is going to be less interested now because it's not a Musk story. It can't be directly linked. I mean, Doge does have a stink on it too, so we'll see. But I hope you're right. I hope that the media keeps hounding Doge. Wired certainly is for now still doing a great job there, and I do hope that continues.
Yeah, I think we can definitely rely on Wired to keep up the pressure there. And on the point about the media, like even on Tuesday, the New York Times published a piece called "A Partial Defense of Elon Musk" that was, basically saying, like, and I'll quote from it: "For better or worse, Elon Musk is a visionary. I have no doubt that he's volatile and reckless, but those who dismiss him as a fraud or an idiot have not been paying close attention." It's like, is this really what we need in this moment? Yeah.
I've been paying closer attention. We've been paying closer attention than anyone would ever want to do. And you are, I mean, idiot is a term that contains multitudes. Like, obviously he's not just like a dum-dum. He's, I think idiot is perfectly applicable. He's certainly a fraud. He's certainly
no question.
No question about it. He's just a massive fraud, like in the generally understood sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Ed Niedermeyer, who we're both very familiar with, have talked to before, he has described very clearly how basically Elon Musk has been lying continually about Tesla and about these other companies in order to keep their share prices, keep interest going.
Full self-driving, perfect example.
Totally.
The full self-driving, we're going to make a promise that self-driving cars this time next year. Full autopilot. Yeah, well, you'll have complete autopilot, and then people put it on autopilot and die. Like, there's been real investigations, real allegations, and just in the legalese, he has not, I think, been convicted of fraud, but a lot of this behavior is what we understand to be fraudulent.
Literally, as we talk on Wednesday, there's a story out in Bloomberg today about a major Tesla crash using full self-driving and what that shows about the system. So, like, there are people paying close attention to this, and I think that the attempt to roll out a robotaxi service in Austin is going to show even more how you really can't believe that this is the system.
Yeah, you were talking about Stargate earlier. Now robotaxi. This is another example where it's like, let's see, right? Like, and then I'm sure he'll have an excuse when it doesn't work perfectly, or when it makes big mistakes, or we could all be proven wrong, and like there's suddenly a fleet of Muskian robotaxis loosed onto the road. But he just has this long history. There was that other story where somebody reported that the new sort of $25,000 tier Tesla car had been canceled, and Musk was like, this is just fake news. This is, the journalists being, and then like the executives at Tesla were like, no, actually, that's correct. We've canceled that car. It's gone.
Totally. That was a Reuters story there a number of months ago, right? Because, he wanted to pursue robotaxis. And then later he was like, that was probably a bad decision. There was like reporting on this that they sort of went back on it, kind of, maybe not exactly. Yeah. And it was very unclear what is actually going on with Tesla. Of course, they say now that they are planning to release a cheaper car in the near-ish future. But again, it remains to be seen if that's going to make a big difference for the company, because they have really had difficulty scaling up production for a long time. I wanted to bring up two other stories that are related to this too. On the Musk piece of this, we have talked in previous episodes about this difficult relationship between Sam Altman and Elon Musk relating to OpenAI and the history there. Of course, outlined in really great detail in Karen Howe's book, Empire of AI, but, there's been plenty of reporting on it beyond that too. And apparently one of the other irritants in the relationship between Elon Musk and the White House is that when they were all over in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates recently, there were a lot of deals being announced. Sam Altman and OpenAI were part of that. And of course, one of the deals that was announced was this big Stargate campus in the United Arab Emirates between OpenAI, Oracle, NVIDIA, Cisco. and an Emirati firm called G42. And it's G42 that will be providing a lot of the financing for this thing to actually be built out. But Elon Musk, right up until the last minute, was trying to cancel this deal, was trying to make sure it was not going to move forward. And Trump ultimately delayed the announcement of it, made sure he didn't appear publicly with Sam Altman so as not to like really irritate Elon Musk. So again, how this like kind of interpersonal dynamic is affecting these broader, I don't know, geopolitical efforts, these relationships, these deals, all these sorts of things.
That is one area that I would love to see more reporting on in general, because even while Musk was at sort of the height of his powers and the height of his sort of reputation within Republican circles, whatever, 6 months ago, the administration never totally boxed out OpenAI, despite Sam Altman being his sort of number one sort of, nemesis. Like they still brought Sam Altman on stage with Trump to announce the first Stargate thing. And Musk has been kind of like grumbling in the background about it, from then. And obviously he's been feuding with Altman over a number of different things, and especially like the legal battles over the founding of OpenAI itself, which Musk was a co-founder of course. But yeah, and then to see that sort of like culminate in this trip to Saudi Arabia, and then his trying and unsuccessfully being able to stop these deals from going through. In hindsight, it's another sign that the administration kind of was at least like they knew at least that OpenAI was a big enough name, or they weren't gonna risk putting them on the outs for Musk. And I would love to see more details about that saga too, because I think if he had ever like truly had full control or full power, that he would have been able to box out some of those favors and some of that stage sharing with OpenAI.
And I would imagine part of it is like the scale of the deals, right? Trump loves his deals, loves to announce big figures. The Stargate project was what, $500 billion they were talking about or something at one point.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there's a breakdown that was published in the Financial Times quite recently looking at these Stargate projects, the one supposedly happening in the US and the one in the UAE. And they were like, the only one that really has the financing behind it right now is the one in the United Arab Emirates, not the one in the US.
Because the Emiratis just have billions and billions of dollars to actually do it. They have a long history of investing in these sort of these moonshot projects in the desert, because they just have ungodly amounts of oil money. Like when I was a cub reporter or blogger guy, too long ago. Let's just put it many years ago.
Back in the earlier days.
In the earlier days, I was working for the Discovery Channel, and I went out to
pre-David Zaslav, or
I don't know when he took over exactly, but I think so, because I mean this was whatever, like 15 years ago, maybe. So
we weren't saying, we don't want to reveal your
or my I'm not that old. I don't. But it was like the late 2000s. I went to the United Arab Emirates to see Masdar City. Have you ever heard of Masdar City?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The smart city in the desert.
It was going to be the clean energy, the 100% like clean energy city that they were building out of like I feel like we've kind of forgotten about it, because it was like in many ways sort of like the proto Neom, which is that like the line city that they're like Saudi Arabia is building, and they're like against all better judgment of anybody in the entire world. But the Masdar City was like, yeah, they were gonna build a city with like power it with clean energy, invite like clean energy researchers, scientists, and it was going to be this hub of sort of international clean tech, cutting edge research, commerce.
Yeah, there were going to be no cars. There was going to be this special pod system to get around. Yeah,
and they built like one block, and they drive you out in a bus, and you could like just like see it just like just like sitting there like in profile in the desert, because the desert's just so flat. It just looks like somebody just like dropped a big box in the desert. They had managed to coax like a couple dozen like Siemens workers from Germany to like work on clean tech. So they had like one Siemens building, like one cafe, and then like one like idly spinning like wind turbine like at the end. It was you could go through it. It was just like the saddest like darkest kind of just like, we're gonna will into existence the clean powered utopia of the future, and this is how far we got like maybe 12 full-time residents. So like this is like, this utopianism has just sort of always, kind of been there. They've always been willing to just like dump this kind of cash into projects like this. So yeah, sure, Sam Altman, you want to build a Stargate? Like here's $30 billion or whatever. We'll build you some data centers in the middle of nowhere, and we'll see what actually comes of it. But they will spend the money. They will start building it, and since it's data centers and relatively sort of universal, and it's not just going to wind up being a city block that no one goes to, it can have other uses. Maybe they will. Well, it has much more viability than I think. Anyways, tangent
Sure, yeah.
ended. Yes.
No, that's fine. It's like them and the Saudis are just desperate to spend all of this money to try to like diversify and show that they can do something other than oil and gas, because they recognize that, the dependence that they have on this, this limited resource is going to run out at some point.
Right. It's finite. And before it was clean tech. Yeah. There's like, we'll do clean energy. And then it was like,
well, and they're increasingly positioning themselves as like a solar hub, and they're talking more about nuclear energy and all this kind of stuff. But, they're still like, petrostate, authoritarian monarchies at the end of the day.
Yes, they very much are.
Yeah.
It's so, yeah, it is really, interesting that's what ultimately pans out, is just like Sam Altman gets his Stargate in the, I mean, I wonder, has there been any reporting? Like, I think Musk wanted a contract like that to go to XAI instead. I think that was part of it, that he like, or at least he wanted his AI company to get some deals too, and he was kind of boxed out of that too.
Well, because Grok is a joke, but
yeah, well, Grok is a joke, but yeah, but the AI gold rush is so insane that X. That's the reason he grafted X onto the AI company, is because saying AI and you're Elon Musk, even if everything else is a train wreck, is a nightmare. These are the AI boom times, so you still get money. I forget, he still gets $10 billion or whatever. It's still like instantly made it one of the highest value startups in Silicon Valley, just by virtue of it being AI and having access to the X platform and Elon Musk.
Exactly. AI, Elon Musk, okay, money. That's just how it works. But, speaking of like governments with, authoritarian tendencies, to go back stateside, there was one other like major story that we wanted to get to this week, which is this contract that, or these kind of escalating contracts that Palantir is getting with the US government that allows it to get more and more data from these different departments of the US government as they are increasingly using its Foundry, basically platform. And there's growing concern that this would allow Palantir to basically bring together all of this data from different aspects of the US federal government in a way that, wasn't previously kind of allowed before. Like, the idea was that all of this data should be siloed and should not be brought together. But that is, a barrier that the Trump administration has been trying to bring down, that Doge has already been trying to get all of this data and bring it together. And now it looks like Palantir could actually be the platform that is able to, carry this out essentially. And then thinking about the implications of a company like Palantir being the platform on which all of this government data is not only stored, but is being brought together and used to be able to identify different things about American citizens is definitely a scary prospect.
Yeah, I mean, that's what a lot of folks have been worried about for a long time. Even a lot of folks on the right, ostensibly, have previously been worried about. I mean, they've been marginalized now to a large degree, but like, yeah, like having a database like operated by Palantir and with this kind of sensitive data, we know it's how leaky it can be now, and we know that it's just sloshing around, and we know how many eyeballs are likely to be on this for God knows what purpose. It's just yet another sign and signal of just how much the power that the Silicon Valley contingent has accrued in this administration in general. This is at Palantir, of course, is a Teal project, and Teal is another guy. Not to go on an immediate tangent here, but Teal is.
You're loving your tangents this week.
Love my tangents today. There isn't that much, but Teal, even as all this is happening, Teal is still pretty in the shadows, hasn't he? Like
Teal has very much been taking a low profile at the moment. There were
Which is
stories before
interesting.
the election that he wasn't doing much to back Trump in this cycle.
Yeah, we've talked about that, how he's been kind of a more sort of distant figure. But he really was involved the first. He was like a shock troop for the right-wing Silicon Valley contingent to sort of get into government. He was the one who sort of broke the seal during the first Trump administration. And
maybe I'd briefly plug as well that if you're interested in more on Teal and these defense tech companies, we've been discussing it on our bonus episodes. If you want to go over to Patreon and get those.
Yeah, we have a good one on Teal because he instead of joining symbiotically with Trump, he comes out with these sort of weird pseudo philosophical screeds about reconciliation and has his. So definitely go check these out. But for whatever reason, he has ceded the limelight to Musk and guys like David Sachs and Palmer Luckey, who's been really making the rounds lately for Anduril, sort of like a Palantir kind of sister company almost.
One thing I would probably add there too is if you look at a company like Palantir, it is getting more and more contracts. It is growing. Its view of how the tech industry should be reoriented is ascendant. And at a time when the stock market has been struggling a bit in the United States and the tech companies in general haven't been exploding in the way that they have in the past, Palantir has actually been rising quite significantly. Its star has been ascendant. Its valuation has been ascendant as well. And that is because of, the influential role it is increasingly playing here. And I think it's definitely something that we need to continue watching out for.
Yeah. And I would also just sort of underline that just a lot of these projects rely on sort of this reputation. I mean, there's a reason that Alex Karp is out there talking about the Warriors and Palmer Luckey is sort of aggressively making this Silicon Valley mindset infused sort of push into defense tech but from what I understand and from some of the reports I've been reading, the tools aren't necessarily hyper sophisticated and scary. They're big databases, and I think we should be more worried about how shitty they are, the data leaking, the way Sam Biddle had a good report in The Intercept a week or two ago about just how the spy agencies are basically eluding old rules that used to require court orders to obtain data, and they're just buying it up. It's really becoming combined with Doge and combined with all this stuff, it's just becoming such a free for all. And honestly, you start to lose contact with it. You're I have no idea where my data. You can just assume that anything that you're not saying on Signal or in encrypted areas, or it's being sort of vacuumed up at this point because it's so relentless, and it's both relentless and incompetent on a lot of levels. And it is relentless and incompetent. Maybe that to tie it back home. Maybe that's a good description of Doge. Relentless and incompetent, done under the banner of pseudo technocracy.
I like it. And we know Elon Musk's grandfather has ties back to technocracy and the movement in North America.
That's right. Rebecca, in was it in Canada even?
Yeah.
Was it he was before he went back to, because Canada wasn't racist enough for him, so he wanted to go back to South Africa.
Not even back, just he'd never been there. He wanted to go there.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
He wanted to go. Oh, God.
He was like, apartheid, that sounds like a great idea,
I want in. I want in, and let me imprint these values into my family line, right down to the child who's punching my billionaire son in the face.
Good way to tie it all together there, Brian.
I just want to finish by saying that the interesting sort of quirk to me is that Elon, like, there is something to be said for the way that sort of Elon was put to work, was used by the administration, and like the way that the specific way that he feels burned now, because he didn't, right, we've talked about on the show, like the number one thing was that he was fed up with democratic institutions. He felt like he was going to be investigated and litigated a lot more under a Biden or Harris round two. So he gives that famous quote to Tucker Carlson where he says, like, I'm fucked if I lose, and goes all in on Trump, which was just more to get out of any jams and try to improve his position. He gets into Trump. He settles on this Doge thing kind of impulsively, like Republicans eager to sort of applaud a project or to see ways that they can find it useful to them. Guys like Russ Vought, who's orchestrated this sort of Project 2025, you see some overlap where he can set the Doge goons loose on achieving his ends. And Musk is like suddenly like all in, like, even though it's horseshit, in his mind, he's constructed this, this project where he's going to eliminate government waste. And that is the aim. Like, everybody's saying, go Elon, like, we love you. You just sunk millions of dollars into the election. You helped us get Trump on board, and like, go Elon, go Elon. So he like unleashes Doge, sort of like guided by, there's good reports in Politico and everyone, how they sort of shaped the project, pushed him along and got him to, do more cuts than they ever thought were possible in some cases. And he's like, great, we're making progress, cuts. And then, the budget bill comes out. He burns his political capital. He starts to, look foolish and annoying, and people are getting sick of him just at the same time that, like, real politics enters the fray again. And the Republicans are like, okay, like, here's our bill. We're gonna like gut taxes. We're gonna cut, so we don't care. Like, I think there is like a legitimate like point of tension here where Elon was like, well, wait a minute. What was I doing all this time? Like, I was cutting government waste, and you're going to put a bunch of it back in? You're going to put, like, he was kind of, I think, legitimately oblivious to the politics and the nature of, just because he has this blinkered view of whatever he was doing, and everybody was telling him he was a good boy. And now all of a sudden, like, it's like it becomes clear that this is just a political project. The GOP doesn't really give a shit about cutting government waste. They care about sort of hollowing out any bastions that might have been roadblocks or create friction to their projects. If they're in control, like, they don't care about government bloat. If they can get Trump loyalists or like more conservative or right-wing loyalists installed in government, they're happy. And they don't care about the deficit ultimately. They care about tax cuts from rich people. They care about, right-wing ideology sort of infiltrating more levers of the government. So Musk, I think he really does, feel like burned, especially because his companies are in shambles. He's hated now by large swaths of the global population, and they're making a mockery of his project by sort of adding billions to the deficit right when he was supposed to be cutting it. So yeah, Elon Musk comes out of this kind of a loser on one level, at least looking like a loser. Ultimately his ties to powerful figures in government may, sort of bolster his bottom line, or maybe it all comes crashing down. I don't know, but he sure looks like a loser and foolish as a result of all of this.
Jeez, Brian, you keep talking like that. The New York Times might write an op-ed about how Elon Musk was mistreated by the Trump administration. Poor Elon.
That would be a sneaky way. Maybe they would like that. Maybe to say all of what I just said. Like, of course he was mistreated by the Trump. They used him, but he's an idiot for letting them. Right? He's a moron in the first place. But I think that
Brian's pulling out the violin for poor Elon Musk.
Not that I feel bad for him. I think he deserves all of it. Obviously, I think I think it's funny, but But yeah, I think, like I said at the top of the show, I think, I think Trump got the upper hand and sort of made him put him to use, and they got what they wanted out of him. Elon did his job.
No, they use them really well, and in the New York Times, there's like an estimate in the New York Times of what Doge has actually theoretically saved the government and how much it will actually cost the government. And it's like they kind of even out, and the cost might actually be bigger for the cuts that they made than what they're actually saving.
Because they so many things up because they didn't know what they were doing. Yeah, but again, that is beside the point. Like the dollars and cents,
Totally.
like. The GOP like recognized that this was an ideological project that can be put to their ends, that they could because if the government doesn't work, that benefits them, right? Then they get to continue complaining about how government doesn't function.
But to be clear, Elon Musk wants that too. In that CBS interview, he was saying how he believes in smaller government, and the whole government is like the DMV, and you wouldn't want the DMV running things or whatever. Like, I don't know. It didn't make a whole lot of sense personally.
I mean, ultimately, it opens up more surfaces for him to benefit more by getting government contracts, right?
Absolutely.
Like, oh no, yeah, NASA's fucking everything up. Just like hire SpaceX instead.
Well, on that point, maybe we should pivot to our final stories, because I have a story that I wanted to mention. So maybe I'll get us started.
Ooh, segue. Look at that.
Look at that. Pro podcaster. Perfect. Right here.
Pro podcaster.
First story, Jared Isaacman, who was supposed to be the nominee to head up NASA, now that Elon Musk is out at Doge and, I don't know, is not as close with the Trump administration, his nomination looks like it's being withdrawn by Donald Trump. He was supposed to be kind of like Elon's guy at NASA. So it'll be interesting to see what the consequences of that might be.
Yes. The Washington Post is planning to bring in, quote, non-professional writers coached by an AI editor with a story strength tracker in the latest bit of asinine maneuvering from owner Jeff Bezos. I just have to say, like, once again, we made clear that I'm quite old, and I've lived through many different waves of media shittiness. So I'm old enough to remember when blogging was the big thing, and newspapers were rolling out blogging portals that were going to give ordinary people their voices, which meant that they could, pay everybody less, and they didn't have to hire as many actual writers. And this is just the AI-infused version of that, an AI editor. So Bezos is looking to cut costs. I guess it remains to be seen whether every non-professional voice will have to herald the greatness of the free market system as well.
Sounds like they're turning the Washington Post into Forbes now with all these, the extended network of contributors, basically.
Yeah. Make the Washington Post Forbes again.
Yeah.
Somebody tweeted with this news, I saw.
Next up, Twitter, or X, is supposedly rolling out a disclaimer in Europe now to explain that it has changed the blue check system. It is not a mark of actual verification anymore, but just a mark that people are paying for the platform, because the platform has been facing regulatory action under the European Union's Digital Services Act. And so they're hoping that this is going to try to, remove that potential point of regulation. But we'll see how that works out.
Wonderful. Wonderful and splendid. All right, quality assurance workers at ZeniMax have a tentative contract agreement with Microsoft. And this is the first union contract since the wave of video game unionization took hold a couple of years ago. And this is also important because this has been years in the making. The union was formed 2 years ago in 2023, and it was voluntarily recognized by Microsoft because Microsoft had this big labor neutrality agreement with the Communication Workers of America. But the devil's always in the details. It has taken this long for the contract to actually be ratified. It's been negotiated in bad faith, according to the union. Microsoft has held up the process interminably, so it's dragged on and on and on. And so good to see it finally come to completion. And congrats to all the ZeniMax workers for getting it across the finish line. Solidarity.
Absolutely. I remember there's a story like a month or two ago where there was questions as to whether Microsoft was ever going to follow through on one of these tentative agreements. Yeah.
Yeah, they went on strike. It really looked by all counts like Microsoft was in bad faith. They had the agreement, which was like, we won't meddle in organizing a union, but then, actually becoming one, actually getting any of the benefits that a union would necessitate, we're going to put you through hell when it comes to that. But yeah, so I think probably Microsoft just decided it would be, they did the calculus and just finally, it would have been more bad press at a time when maybe they didn't want to deal with it if they let it drag on or sort of walked away. So, but either way, kudos to all the hard fighting done by the ZeniMax workers.
Absolutely. And final story from me, we know that the U.S. government has been trying to throw its weight around to get other countries around the world to stop regulating its tech industry. Well, its latest effort to do that is an announcement that it will potentially start denying visas to foreign officials coming from countries that have been judged to have censored social media posts of Americans. Something clearly targeting European Union officials as they have been moving forward with a greater regulation of social media and online platforms over there. And of course, we saw, how J.D. Vance lashed out at the European Union when he was over in France and Germany a few months ago. So this is a continual escalation on that. It's kind of wild to suggest that they would, deny the ability for foreign officials to come over to the United States.
Ridiculous. And yet, all bets are off right now. Like, I just, you can't, I don't know. Were you surprised to see this?
Not surprised, but it was just like, oh, this is what they chose to do next. Wild.
Yeah. Well, this is the next thing. Always the next thing.
Well, that's our show for the week. System Crash is hosted by Paris Marks and Brian Merchant. Production is by Robin Simon, our new producer.
Yay, Robin!
Our theme music is Dystopia by our good friends in Yacht. Support the show on patreon.com/systemcrashpod to get a monthly bonus episode. Thanks for listening. Bye.